I recently rewatched the movie Pacific Rim and I really loved some of the shots of those massive robots. The scene where the robot get carried by a helicopter and are dropped into the ocean got me thinking, can I remake that, but only in Blender? I know the Blender has a built-in water simulation tool, but is it good enough to create such a massive water simulation? That's what I want to try in this video. I mostly focused on these two shots right here, one where the robot gets carried by the helicopter in the sky, and the other one where they are dropped into the ocean. So will I succeed or will this project completely fail? Let's find out. This video is sponsored by Fox Renderfarm, but more on that later. First, we need to understand how to create an ocean water simulation. Because you can't simulate a whole ocean, this would set your PC on fire in no time. Rather than simulating everything, you just simulate the water patch where the action is happening and surround this simulation later with a simple plane which has an animated texture of an ocean on it. Before we can do all that, we need a 3D model of a robot. On Sketchfab I found one from a movie and imported it into Blender. The model was not rigged, and because I'm a super lazy person, I just dragged the robot into Mixamo, a free rigging tool, and let it auto-rig the character. After a few minutes I had this. In the animations tab I could also select a dropping animation, and I reduced the speed because larger objects always move way slower. With the animation ready in Blender, we can start with the water simulation. And let me tell you, this was such a hard challenge, and you will realize that throughout the video. To explain the general idea, here is what you have to do. Add in a cube, scale it up to the size of the water volume that you need, press F3 and search for quick fluid. This sets up everything you need for the water simulation. It also creates a domain cube, which shows in which area the simulation will be calculated in. Everything outside of the cube won't be calculated. And have I told you already, water simulations take up a lot of storage. You will see that in a few moments what I mean with that exactly. With the default settings, the cube you created in the beginning is filled with water. But if you press play, the water drops down and it's not nearly enough to simulate what we want. That's why we have to change the flow behavior to inflow, which means it keeps filling the domain with water. For some reason it kinda stops after the water level is over the cube, but that comes in handy for me because that's exactly what I need. The only problem we have with that is that the water takes a few seconds until it's full and ready, which is why I had to move the animation of the robot back 90 frames. That our robot interacts with the water, we can select the parts and add in a fluid modifier. Set it to Effector and it should work. Now we can see something happening already. I played around with the settings for about an hour to find the right speed and movement of the water. At that point I realized that you can activate foam and spray, which is awesome, and I have to show this in a separate scene. Without foam and spray you just have a raw water simulation, which is already cool, but it's not too realistic. If you now activate these, you get separate particle systems, which you can replace with small spheres to simulate foam and spray. I rendered the scene out and here you can see we have bubbles in the water, spray and foam on top of the surface, where the waves clash into each other and spike out. This adds so much to the realism, but is also heavier for your computer and takes up more storage. In the next weeks I will also make an in-depth tutorial about that topic, so follow if you don't want to miss that. Back into the original scene, and with my naive mind I activated everything. Set the resolution to a super high number for maximum detail. Happy with what I saw in the preview screen, I wanted to cache the whole simulation, which basically means save it so it can't be destroyed and I don't have to do it all over again. I went to my day job where I was about for 9 hours. After I came back, excited to see the results, the caching was not even finished. I could not believe it after 9 hours. I knew something was wrong, so I went into the savings folder and checked how much space this simulation took up from my storage. 608 gigabytes. At that moment I knew this won't be an easy challenge. Because of the high resolution, all the extra particle systems, it was all overkill. I knew I had to fine-tune every little setting to not overload the scene. What takes up even more time is rendering such a big scenery and animation. That's why I'm sponsored by Fox Renderfarm for this video. With Fox Renderfarm you can easily upload all your animations from a large variety of softwares and render it in the cloud. This saves you a ton of time, and even more if you do not have a super massive computer. You can render with CPU and GPU, and they currently also also have a crazy sale going on, where you get 100% bonus on CPU and 50% bonus on GPU rendering. That means if you buy $500 worth of CPU rendering, you get an extra $500 on top. And $250 if you buy GPU rendering coupons. I tried it out and it's so easy. Simply drag your Blender file in it, select if you have used any plugins, choose the frames you want to render, and off you go. It will upload the scene and instantly render it out. The cost depends on the scene, but my frame only cost me 15 cents. So what are you waiting for? Click the link below and try it out for yourself with the free $25 coupon you get by just logging in. To get a new perspective, I started with the second shot, where the robot gets carried by a helicopter. First animated the movement of the robot getting carried for a few meters and then gets dropped. It took longer than expected because I suck at animation. With the animation in place, I added an HDRI and set up the light to kind of match the lighting from the movie. The massive ocean also needs to be done in 2 steps. First, we start in a different file and just add a plane with the ocean modifier on it. We animate the waves and create the textures. The height and color maps can now be exported out as an image sequence. Back into the original scene, we can create a massive circle with a few loop cuts and add the texture we created into the material. The textures are animated, so the ocean will also move. Now we can expand the circle as far out as we want, and it's not going to lag much because it's only a texture that runs on it and not a simulation. I searched a nice sky image and placed it in the background. To get a better sense of movement, I also added a few cloud images and animated them flying by. That's a good way to make things in the air look like they are moving fast. One thing that was left is adding this second robot coming in, which was quite easy, and the ropes that hold him in the air. I was surprised how tricky this is. You can start by adding a plane and scale it on the long axis. Create some loop cuts and select the end vertices to assign them to a vertex group. Put the cloth modifier onto the plane and set the pin group to the vertex group we just created. To move the endpoints, you can press Ctrl H in the edit mode with one end selected and select Hook to New Object. Now you can animate the endpoints and the middle part will be simulated. To make it round like a rope, you need to add a subdivision surface and a solidify modifier. Because one rope took so much time, I only did 2 of them to save some time in general. If you want a separate tutorial about the rope simulation, let me know in the comments. With that scene done, it was time to face the water simulation again. The first improvement was that I realized if you upscale the cube larger than the domain, the water starts still and is already filled up. With that knowledge, the animation could start on frame 1 and we don't have to calculate the 90 frames until the water is filled up. Already with that, I got way much faster caching time, about 1 hour with particles. I also imported the ocean into the scene and tried to blend the water simulation with the ocean, but somehow it was not quite right. I have to say the simulation looked okayish at that point and I could have used that, but I wanted to simulate it with a bit more resolution. But sadly that gave me this result. And again, I did not know exactly what was wrong. That's why I started using an add-on called Flip Fluids. I really wanted to do this scene without any additional add-ons, but I was forced to try one last thing. With the Flip Fluid add-on, you can change the cube volume to just a plane, which acts as a volume. This is a game changer because it saves a lot of calculation and it's great to blend it together with a flat ocean plane. So after playing with different settings again for about an hour, I baked it and it looked kinda good and it blended perfectly together with the ocean. But as you can see, I set the domain way too low. All the particles that should shoot up are deleted at that line. Frustrated about myself, I did one last baking, set up the textures and the particles to get my final animation. Before I show you the results, I want to add that I'm not 100% happy with the outcome, and Blender still has a lot of work to do to optimize the fluid simulations for larger stuff like that. I can never come close to original movie scenes because hundreds of people are working on them for months, and I'm only one person which has limited time on my hands. That being said, enjoy the results. Maybe you can see I added some post effects and color corrections to the scene to make them a bit more appealing. Overall, it was a super cool project and I hope I could inspire you to create your own artworks and animations. I wish you a creative day and don't forget to keep pushing boundaries.